Shadow of Truth, and today is Thursday, January the 5th, 2017, and your hosts are Rory Hall from thedailycoin.org and Dave Kranzler from investmentresearchdynamics.com. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing all right. I understand you got about a foot or so of snow where you're at.
Yeah, why are we working? I mean, everything else is closed here for a snow day. Why do I have to work?
Because we don't actually work.
Speak for yourself.
No, we are an FNO, a fake news organization.
Oh, good point.
So let's get into some
Wait,
fake
let
news.
me open my email from Putin and see what I'm supposed to say today.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Yes, let's see what Putin's directives are for today.
Good morning, Comrade Rory.
Yes. Okay, Comrade Dave. Let's jump in and see what our directives are.
Sounds good. That's really hopeful, but it's not the truth.
Well, that's what when I read that, it's like that's all I could think is wishful thinking, you know.
Yeah. I mean, his premise there is, you know, they're losing control of their manipulation and control schemes, but he thinks they're just going to give up.
Right. Well, and that's what I've said for a long time. They're not just going to roll over and say, "Well, okay, you guys win." We were
Yeah,
wrong. We're sorry. We mistreated you for the last 300-400 years. You're right. We should give it up. That ain't gonna happen.
right,
Not without some serious consequences.
right.
Lots of bloodshed, lots of people, lots of new technology that we are unaware of at this point. That's my biggest fear. Is what does
Well,
DARPA
and
what does DARPA have in the back room?
that's right. And with this lawsuit, I mean, I love the fact that Newmeyer joined it,
Yes.
but I mean, I'm not even is J.P. Morgan even a named defendant in this thing? I'm
Not
not sure
yet.
if they. I mean, they weren't named in any of the Deutsche Bank admissions.
Nope.
And so, I mean, you can go after the symptoms of cancer, but until you attack the cancer itself, cancer's still there.
Right. I mean, HSBC, that's a pretty big component of it. Scotia Makata, another big component. Obviously, Deutsche Bank. I mean, we now know why Deutsche Bank gave up their seat a couple of years ago on
I
setting the
I think
fix.
I think Deutsche Bank is so badly pinned down on the ropes. I mean, technically that bank's insolvent, and I think right now they're basically just they're fighting to preserve staying alive.
And so you think they're just a caged animal or a trapped, wounded animal striking out?
Right, essentially. Well, I think it's more of like a zombie trying to you know
More brains.
yeah. So the other I don't know how much it's connected into, they can't let Deutsche Bank go down because of the systemic consequences.
Yeah, I mean, if they go down, then that's going to cause some serious problems in the derivatives market.
Well, it'll directly take down the biggest U.S. banks. When he says, global changes of this magnitude mean that the entrenched systems run by central banks and deep state politics are set to destabilize on a level we may have not witnessed in our lifetimes. Yeah, that may be true, but that just means they're going to lash back with even more totalitarian policies and more militarism. I mean, we're seeing that now with the announcement that the U.S. has moved special forces into Lithuania along the Russian border.
Yep.
I'm not
Yeah.
even sure how the U.S. can do that right now because it's you don't you got a commander in chief in limbo. I mean, did Trump sign off on that? I'd be surprised if he did, which means Obama's calling that shot.
Yeah. That would have to be. I mean, he is still the sitting president. He is the
Yeah,
sitting president until January the 20th for 15 more days.
and how responsible is it for him to make that determination? At this point in his presidency.
Well, you and I both know that he's not actually making that call. I mean, he's just signing off on it, and it's the lunatic fringe is that's gotten us into Syria and Libya and Yemen and right down the line that are calling these shots. And I think it's a play to make Trump look bad and to kind of force his hand come January 21st.
Except if Obama's not calling that shot, then does it mean Trump's going to be calling anything when he gets in there?
Well, that's good. That's a good question. I mean, the deep state's been in charge for a while now, or so it seems. Anyway,
They're messing up their story on the Russian hacking thing, though.
they're getting some serious black eyes over there.
And every time they try to change it around, they dig a deeper hole.
Yes.
It just
Yeah.
becomes, I don't know who they're trying to convince now because I'm not sure that many people even believe the story anymore.
Right. And then Trump just a couple of hours ago came out and tweeted out, lying media, dishonest media lies. The
Well,
dis
and see, there's an example of where I get worried that, yeah, I mean, I love the fact that he's browbeating the rigged media, and that's
yes.
great. But that you're going to create an information vacuum there, and who's going to get control of that? I mean, he's he's a quote unquote iron fisted businessman. You're fired. It's his way or the highway. So is he's just gonna? I think he's just gonna be a different form of controlled information, and that's the problem that I see coming here. And that actually kind of ties into this idea that, yeah, the entrenched systems are destabilized. There's no question about it. Something had to give. I mean, there's been so much attempted control and manipulation. James Kunstler wrote his year-end piece entitled, it's called something like "The Wheels Come Off in 2017" or something. It's on
Yes.
his website. It was one of the best things I've read all year. And he talks about all the money that the central banks, not just here but globally, have thrown into the banking system. And if they were to remove that, everything would collapse. But what's the alternative here? Because now you're at a point where you're going to need to start throwing a lot more money into the system because the money that they've thrown in there has already worked through the system, and it's held things up for what, 4 years, 5 years.
At least.
And yeah, and you've run out of room here, especially given the amount of debt. I mean, that's now outstanding. I mean, there's more debt now. Well, first of all, there's twice as much government debt as there was when the 2008 financial crisis occurred,
Right.
and that's just government debt. I mean, systemic wide. I saw a really interesting statistic the other day because I knew the subprime auto loan thing was going to become an issue. In 2008, when the subprime mortgage problem collapsed, there was 650 billion in subprime mortgage debt, and right now there's close to 500 billion in subprime auto debt. And auto debt is much more insidious beast than mortgage debt because at some level a house holds its value, but and it's not a depreciating asset per se, but cars go down in value every day you drive them.
Yep.
So the
And it's a
collateral
lot
back,
easier to walk away. I mean,
right,
you just leave it and be done with it, and there you have it. And that's
right.
what I
And the
see
argument is,
coming.
well, the bank can repossess it and sell the car and pay off its debt. Well, no, because right now there's most of that subprime auto debt is in a negative equity position, and the cars, used cars, are going down in value very quickly right now.
Because there's too many.
Exactly.
I mean, there's so many of them. I mean, why am I going to pay more than I should
Right.
for, like you said, something that depreciates every single day?
Right.
I mean, it's
Well, I guess my point here is that not only is, well, first of all, they've reflated the housing bubble in a major way. But now you've got this auto debt bubble that's getting, I mean, it is starting to blow up. I mean, the default rate on subprime ABS securities is about 10% right now.
and that is to say nothing of the student loan debt.
Well,
That's
that's a whole other, yeah. I mean, that's a problem too.
yeah. I mean, in there that's been showing signs for several months of having issues.
Oh, that's
Where
huge issues.
yeah, I mean, you've got all kinds of defaults and late payments, and I mean, yeah. So the system is saturated, and in order for them, the central banks, to be able to even come close to addressing any of this, they're probably going to have to double what they've already got in the system. Otherwise, things are going to just start falling out.
They're going to have to more than double it.
More than double. Well, there you go. I mean, even worse than I thought.
Right.
So, where's that going to come from? What magic bean are they going to unleash in order to create this more than double what's already in the system?
Well, and that was the point of the Kunstler article. And actually, I said this 6 months ago. I said, they may raise rates in December to save face, but the next move after that's going to be more QE. And that was the conclusion he came to as well, that, you're looking at more QE at some point,
Yeah, but I'm
or some form of it. I hate when they call it QE because it's really money printing. I mean, the idea here is that the government, the Fed prints money and buys treasuries from the government via the banks. And because that money that's been printed is quote unquote collateralized by treasuries, it's not really money printing. But at this point, it looks like the Fed is holding on to those things to maturity. And the only way, how are you going to pay those things off? You got to print more money to pay them off. So,
yeah, I mean, and that's just taking money out of or I'm sorry, taking currency out of the left pocket and putting it in the right pocket and say, see, everything's great, all
right.
paid up.
Yep.
I mean, it's nothing more than that. That's all that it is. I mean, and I guess that's why China is looking at it and going, well, we're done with these treasuries. Well, we're done with these treasuries.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but I think they're also dumping their treasuries. Part of it is to get out of the dollar, but part of it's also to help shore up their own situation.
Well, they're pushing forward with the One Belt, One Road, so they actually will have something for their debt, whereas we won't have anything but a bunch of um, a bunch of people with degrees of that mean nothing, and a bunch of cars that are broken down, and a bunch of houses that are going to be standing empty. That's what we're going to have for all the debt that we've got. They will have rail systems, water systems, solar systems, nuclear power systems, right down the line. New ports, new everything, new airports, new seaports. I mean, they'll have something. We won't have anything. And that's been my argument for a very long time. That is the difference between China's debt and the Western world's debt. They have something. We don't. We got nothing.
Right. And again, I guess I just maybe if we can tie this up here, I wanted to sort of circle back to this idea that, you know, the systems in the West run by central banks and deep state politics are destabilizing, and how is, how does the Trump administration, how do the new European administrations that go in after the elections, what are they going to do to deal with that? I think they're going to make things worse for us and probably try to make things worse for the world because they're not going to give up control rolling over.
Well, I kind of hope that somebody steps in there, Trump, Marine Le Pen, whoever it is. I hope somebody, or I wish that somebody would step in and crash the whole thing because that's what we need. We need for it to just crash and burn and be
Yeah,
done
well,
with it.
Trump's not gonna try. He'll do what he can to avoid the system from crashing under his watch. No one wants to be tagged with that.
Well, they may tag him with it.
Well, that's where I think it. That's where I think it. That's where the danger lies for just the general population. It's like, what are these guys capable of doing? I
Well,
mean, there's just no telling.
there is no telling. I mean, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, nobody had ever heard of quantitative easing, but we can say it now. So he's
Right, and I
got,
guess the point here is that obviously it wouldn't have been any different with Clinton in there versus Trump. And, the next president, no matter who it was facing the same issues, and it's how how you deal with those issues. So, I mean, and finally it hit me a good way to summarize the election because someone said, well, Trump's better than Hillary, and then someone else said, well, Hillary would have been better than Trump. And I said, that's like making the choice between liver cancer and pancreas cancer.
yeah,
And that's
both
really what it
fatal.
was. There was no good choice.
There is no good choice. Well, it's going to be an interesting year. However, whatever happens, I think that we are in for some very, very interesting times in the not too distant future. And it will be interesting to see how the next couple months play out, in particular with Obamacare being repealed and what the ramifications of that and all of these other items that we've been discussing as far as how's the deep state going to react to some of the changes that Trump is wanting to institute or not institute. I guess we'll just leave it right there. What do you think, Dave?
That sounds good to me. I got to go dig out from the snowstorm anyway.
Well, all right. Well, that's our first show for the year, and look for many more. Dave, I guess we'll talk to you on Monday.
That sounds great.
All right, buddy. Have a good weekend.
You too.